Curse of the Saco River. I was born and raised in the city of Biddleford, Maine. The city itself is full of somewhat garbage people, but I wouldn't have wanted to grow up anywhere else. I had many wonderful memories, as the beach was an hour walk away. The backyard was sprawling, and the woods that led down the river was right next to my house. It runs about 535 miles from New Hampshire and splits the towns of Biddleford and Saco, emptying out into the ocean beyond. Most mothers, mine included, did everything in their power to make sure that children didn't go to the water until 3 people died at the beginning of the year. This may sound morbid, and indeed it is, but for good reason. All the children in the cul-de-sac knew bits of the information, usually clashing, but I first heard of the story told by an old man named Rodney. Rodney was an old Native American man who lived down the other side of my backyard. His grandson, Josh, and I would often play games with each other and became pretty good friends. Rodney was a good-spirited man, always telling us fun stories from the people from his lineage, and usually scary ones when we would put the tent up back out and camp out for the night. It was one such night I heard the curse of the Saco River. Back in the year 1675, Winter Harbor, now known as Biddleford, was well established by Europeans. The local Sacoquis natives generally welcomed them, and boats would come and go along the Saco River. One such boat carried 3 white men, who said to be as drunk as a skunk, and meaner than one too. A woman who had given birth to the chief's son was upon one of the islands, carrying the child in a towel. They decided to have a little fun and test out a story they once heard. It was said that Native Americans could doggle puddle from birth, and they wanted to find out, most likely making a few bets on it. Despite the woman's screams, they ripped the baby from her arms and threw him into the water. Unsurprisingly, the child had drowned. Some say she went in after him, only to drown herself. Others not. What eventually did happen is Chief Squandro, not to be confused with Squanto, found out and placed the curse on the river until the day white men cleared the banks. The spirit of the river would take 3 lives a year. Some say the 3 were killed right there, but regardless, there were no delegations made. In fact, it was said to ignite violence between the tribe and the Europeans, kicking off the war of King Philip. There was a little more to it than that, I'm sure, but it's been about 26 years now, so the memory is a bit fuzzy. The one thing I can never forget, in fact, it's probably what caused my terrible lifelong nightmares, is the night he took us out for fishing. Conveniently enough, Rodney took us by canoe out to Skeleton Dam. It's a popular place for fishing and swimming. In late summer, the sun is warm, while being shaded by the large forest around it, and the sun goes down. The sounds of wildlife makes it an unparalleled place to relax. He had paddled us down the stream for about an hour when finally the night came on. We didn't catch a whole lot, and honestly, At 7 years old, I hardly knew what I was doing, but I had fun with Josh, and Rodney was telling more of his stories of the past. I don't know what time it was, possibly 10 or 11, but fog began rolling across the water. Rodney made a crack about the spirit, making their way from the deep, when all noise from the banks stopped. There were no insects, birds or frogs to be heard, just the quiet sloshing of the water on wood. I don't think we even noticed at first, not until I could see the dead serious look on old Rodney's face. He didn't say it, but he was scared. He said something to the effect of, "We better pack it in." So we reeled in our fishing poles, and he started a long trip back up the river. Being children, Josh and I didn't really panic. Rodney was experienced in the woods, and though he stayed silent, he didn't much let on that something was wrong. He just kept his eyes forward and worked the oars. This went on for a while. The sounds of nature were still silent, and it seemed as though every small sound echoed from the one side of the river to the other. The fog was still present. I was growing thicker by the minute. I don't know how Rodney didn't get lost, but I assumed it wasn't his first time in conditions such as this. The closer we got, the more we let go of our fear. That is, until the crying began. I couldn't tell from where, but like a gunshot out of silence, this shrill, high-pitched sobbing rang out from the land. It would be so loud, like it was right next to you, then seemed to move away only to return just as quickly. To make it worse, the sobbing would interrupt into insane bursts of laughter. Even thinking about it now makes me shiver. Not a male or female. It was something I can't possibly find words to match with. As it continued, we started to hear sounds of something jumping through the forest, easily keeping pace with the boat. I tried to block most of it out. That's not the something that ever goes away. I believe that was about the time Josh and I began to cry ourselves. Rodney tried to comfort us, telling us to keep our heads down and to cover our ears, but most of our efforts were spent roaring in a panic-driven manner. The tone of his voice was quick and stern. Nothing like the tired look of his face, and I believe he was praying. The sob crying stopped after a bit to our relief. However, it was short-lived. A woman's voice shot out of someone, distant, but also close. In a blood-freezing tone, it screamed, "Help me!" I looked out through the fog. It wasn't a woman I saw, however. On the bank to the right, I could make out a thin figure. Not too many details were visible, aside from the long horns that sprouted up from its head, like that of a deer. The image quickly melted back to the fog and disappeared. Once again, "Help me! Please!" came from the bank, the opposite one, however, the one closest to us. As this happened, the sound of drums quickly crescendoed away all around us. Like that, a dozen or more people playing drums. Rodney told us once again not to look, and steering the canoe away, towards the center of the river. Like the idiot kid I was, I looked as a large green orbs of light began to appear, along with multiple little men. I say men, but they were all much too short, and the shape wasn't quite right. It was almost like a group of monkeys were all lined up along the shore, just staring at us. As a ghastly cry of help continued to follow, switching sides from time to time. I fairly certain I'd wet my pants back then. I don't think I've ever been so scared in my life, including my current age. Unfortunately, our boat trip through hell wasn't quite over yet. The fog was a constant and would swallow everything almost as quickly as it appeared. As terrifying as the things on the banks were, at least they couldn't get to us, or so I thought. We must have been pretty close to the boat, launching by the point, but before we could get there, the sounds of splashing erupted on all sides of us. The occasional slosh of water told us there was something around the boat, and it wasn't long till the knocking began. It was soft at first, more like something was rubbing the sides of the canoe, but it turned into scratching. But they quickly got louder, as if people were pounding their fist against the sides. It was getting so bad I thought we were going to tip, and poor old Rodney was rowing like a madman. The panic on his face as clear as day. He was no longer trying to be silent, and I could even see something try to grab and pull the oars. These sort of short, black arms that grabbed at whatever they could. Well, we finally made it to the boat launch, Rodney practically throwing us on land. We didn't bother with our bags or fishing stuff either. I was somewhat upset the next day, but I can't blame him on that. We ran to his truck, still hearing drums beat all around us, now coupled with the sounds of loud growls. I can't tell you what for sure, but some sort of animals were pacing around the fog on all fours. They kept a distance, thank God. But before we were fully on the road, we were in one more surprise. The branches and leaves of the trees off to the left of the truck began shuffling. The forest here is thick, so it was hard to see what it was. Some sort of large bird buzzed through the canopy and shot across the lake. I've never seen anything so monstrously huge in my life. Rodney later told me he believes it was a thunderbird. I'm not sure, but the wingspan was anywhere from 20 to 30 feet long. Since that night, I stayed away from the river. In fact, I moved halfway across the country. I can't really tell you a whole lot else from that night. I never got many answers myself. I can tell you, however, that I believe in the curse of the Saco River wholeheartedly, as well as its spirits. Do not go into the river, unless, of course, 3 people have already been found dead.